Hello and welcome to etbfsi.com. My name is Amol Dete and I'm in conversation with Varun Mittal from Ernst& Young, Singapore. Varun, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Amol.
So in this special segment of FinTech Diary, Varun, I would like to learn, a couple of things from you. So we initially thought that, due to pandemic, many FinTechs will have a lot of problems. They will go through a tough time in 2020, but that exactly didn't happen. Obviously there were FinTechs who faced a lot of challenges, but still many FinTechs managed to survive really well, not only in India, but also in Asia. Considering that background, now we are still living in an uncertain world. How do you see the 2021 specifically for FinTechs?
In 2020, what happened was a lot of areas where customers were reluctant to embrace digitization. They were forced. Buying insurance, SMEs embracing how to get the loan application solved. So people were forced. Even the financial institutions were forced to open some of those tech systems, which normally would take 3 years, to do that in 4 weeks because there was no option. So what that has done is it has accelerated the adoption by 5 years in roughly 9 months. There have been reverse sides of that as well. There were a lot of fintechs whose core business was based on an arbitrage that there is not enough convenience, not enough adoption. Right. So if you look at companies like aggregators, online aggregators, comparators, because the financial institutions' own digital channels were not embraced, there was a huge value for those. Now, suddenly they're out of the value chain for some of those scenarios. There were a lot of companies focused on cash dispersal and cash collections last mile. So there were a lot of business models which were for the intermediate phase. They were not designed to be survivor at the end of the thing when everything is in an ideal state. Right. So a lot of those kind of business models will die or will have to pivot very, very fast. Right. However, the other side, which will be D2C, direct to consumer solutions, will go through a significant deeper adoption. The B2B fintechs, there will be a significant consolidation on that as well. Because what happened was in last 9-10 months, several of them were able to sell their solutions to financial institutions. True. But the smaller ones will not. So there will be a significant consolidation on the B2B side, and on the B2C side, the intermediate models will die. The long-term survivor models will scale.
Okay, so all over the world, what I have seen is the trend has shifted from payment to credit. Okay, at one side, yes, there is a great sign that the payment has picked up really well, and pandemic has added a lot to it. In fact, everybody is going digital payments right now. But what has happened to the payments fintechs operating in payment space has absolutely shifted to the credit space. So, do you see, that the consolidation in payment space is also over, because in each and every country there are 2-3 large players operating in that space, and now the focus is going to be absolutely for the credit side?
So I would slightly differ from that perspective, because if you see a large part of the so-called credit is from the merchant side of the things. Right. So what has happened was because the merchant discount rate got squeezed significantly, and the place where merchants were spending money was customer acquisition through digital channels. Okay. So what we had was a new generation of players who said that I will bring you customers. In return, you give me X percentage of revenue. Okay. And normally that would have been done by social media and social platforms, advertising platforms, but they were not integrated into the whole checkout process. So a lot of those companies are now fashionably called buy now, pay later products. But technically it is the merchant which is financing that. Right. And normally what was happening? A merchant was financing the cost of allowing a customer to pay digitally, and somebody is covering for that cost. Right. Now a merchant is financing the same thing. But why a merchant is financing? Because these platforms are also bringing him the customers. The credit cards were always there. The transaction platforms were always there. The key difference was that these platforms went in from a perspective that I'm going to bring customers to you. I'm going to bring traffic to you. And here's a broader set of propositions we can offer to create opportunities for customer. So that demand generation piece, ability to create efficiency, ability to create services industry, anything which is not served today is worth zero. So the real power, if you see credit, most of it is in discretionary consumables. most of the so-called buy now, pay later and credit products are fighting the battles on discretionary consumer spending, where the objective is to drive demand. They are not doing it for daily need products. Most of them are not doing daily need products. Nobody is giving you credit on as much scale for your daily taxi ride or your daily public transit or your house rations. They're going after discretionary consumer spending, which is a part which got compressed because people were not traveling. People were not stepping outside their home. So the discretionary consumer spending squeezed at a biggest pace in the history. And these people are targeting that discretionary consumer spending pace to bring it back up.
Okay, I think very well and comprehensive thoughts, Varun here. But considering now the rally is into credit and different segments here, what will be the focus for the investors? Where will investor pour money in 2021?
Investors are looking at from the perspective of, can you create a sustainable value? If you are creating an arbitrage system, there is not enough runway left for the arbitrage systems.
Right.
So a lot of these so-called credit players which you mentioned, all of them want to be a network.
Right.
They want to reach the level that they are treated as a network, not a payment player. So the part of you being the rails is the important, because globally they have seen every time you are rails, you make real money. Either you own the customer B2C, or you own the rails, or you own both. And the path will go towards owning infrastructure and last mile consumer relationship. Those are the two main areas, which is why if you see all the Dukan Tech or the Kirana companies, because everybody wants to have exclusive control over specific merchant pools, because the idea is then you can serve them more services downstream.
Okay. How has been, the fintech specifically into Singapore right now? I mean, because compared to India or many other Asian countries, Singapore is a very matured market specifically for the fintech. In fact, in other countries, people have started talking about cryptocurrency, but Singapore already has many fintechs operating in that space. So, how has been the focus of the fintechs in Singapore right now?
See, Singapore has been slightly lucky and unique from that perspective. It's a couple of unique factors. Small population, 5.5 million people, very stable national KYC infrastructure, which is given by the government. And I would say in a lot of respects, it's very advanced than India also. So for example, here, the GovTech system can give you income, can give you what level your kids are studying, what is the vaccination schedule of your kids, not even just the income, like it goes that level, what library books you have borrowed. So that level of granular information is available digitally. So that's the lucky part from that. And other part, which is not very well understood outside, it has only one regulator. So for a lot of these companies, they have to go to 4 different regulators. If you have to do something in India, you have 4 different regulators. Here, all is under one regulator. So all roads lead to one. So the decision making, policy making is much more easier because it's just one policy. And when that policy comes, in India, for example, the digital KYC policy for insurance, wealth, payments, and lending are all 4 separate. Here, the digital KYC policy comes from the same department for across the board. So which is why when some of those things happen, it helps you to build out a lot of those things much, much faster. In terms of broader things, Singapore just awarded 4 digital bank licenses. So 2022, so next year, March, 4 new banks will launch from scratch. 2 full banks, 2 wholesale banks from like big ride-hailing companies, e-commerce companies, global Chinese tech giants. So that's one part. The other part where we have seen huge traction is wealth, because it's a center of wealth for rest of the region, including India, China, Southeast Asia. Singapore has 0 capital gains tax. So which is why you have Asia's first bond exchange, Asia's first startup stock trading exchange. So unlisted company stocks can be now traded on those exchanges. Wealth managers, robo-advisors, some of the biggest ones in the region are in Singapore, who have now expanded globally. So we have robo-advisors from Singapore going all the way to Middle East to launch the branches in those markets. You already have Singaporeans launched their business in Mumbai. So that wealth as a center, because wealth is trans-border. Insurance is one border specific. Payment is one border specific. Capital is border independent, it flows. So as a small market, wealth and capital markets is something which is a huge strength, and that's what we have been working as a whole nation towards.
Okay. So I already took your view specifically on the credit and what could happen specifically this particular year in the credit space. But if you could give me a large perspective, because you speak to a lot of fintechs, not only from Singapore and India, but all over the world, and you carry that perspective. So if you could enlighten me on the part of where is the fintech rally heading all over the world right now? After the 2020 of big segment, 2021 is a big push, and now the whole industries and all the financial institutions, those who are not ready, also are ready to collaborate, partner, and integrate with the fintechs. So where is the global fintech rally heading now?
It's a simple race.
Mhm.
Do the tech learns fin first, or the financial institutions learn tech first?
Okay.
So it's a two-sided thing. Broadly, if you see and I'll give you examples. If you look at some of the biggest lending tech companies or the P2P lending companies invest,
Mhm.
they're no more.
Mhm.
They're no more. One of them was acquired by by a large card company. Other
Right.
of them was acquired by another bank. So if you look at the premise for the credit is this, right? The whole foundations of the credit system was borrow for less, lend for more.
True.
And if you're not a deposit taking institution, you are playing on an arbitrage.
Mhm.
So, which is why that is not sustainable. You can do it for a while, and what will happen after that? Your best customers will go to another institution whose cost of income is lower, because you would have reported your customers to the bureau by that time. So you can play that game for a while. You can play that arbitrage game over a while, but after that, your best customers will be lost. You have designed a leaky funnel, and which is why if you see all buy now pay later companies are either trying to become a network or trying to become a bank.
Right.
They are both playing either you become a deposit taking instrument or you become the infra rails. Because if you are going to play the arbitrage game, you can be a rock star for now, but it's a matter of time when the game stops.
True. Okay, that's I think interesting thought. And how do you view now the India specifically? Because India has been giving a tough competition in terms of innovation to many countries. In fact, last year also there were 2 quarters where Indian fintechs raised more money than the Chinese in 1 or 2 quarters. So where is India going in terms of the fintech innovation? What is your reading?
See, the way I look at this, I do not necessarily see fundraising as a benchmark
Right.
of success or not.
Mhm.
Because the key question is this: is fintech bringing real difference to the economy?
Mhm.
Is fintech bringing real difference to the end last mile lives of people?
Mhm.
Are poor people being able to save better for their retirement?
Mhm.
Are poor people getting services and capabilities, bringing more access to them? Is there a real democratization of services happening to the people who need it most?
Mhm.
So the way I look at benchmarking is this: can I would say Henry, high earning, not rich yet Indian, middle class, high earning, not rich yet Henry, can he get the same access which his peer in China or America can?
Right.
Does he have the same access to wealth management, retirement planning, savings, protection, products, and services which his or her peers in other markets will have?
Mhm.
Can a daily wage laborer have access as per his peers? That is, for me, is the way to benchmark. And yes, India has done very well on a lot of those fronts.
Mhm.
But to be fair, there are areas where there could be a lot of improvement, specifically around ease of doing business, because a lot of SMEs are not able to do business because of the systems and the way processes are there, the way taxes are structured, the way foreign currency regulations are structured, the way there is still loads of paper which is put in by the regulatory systems is there. So there is a huge scope for improvement there. A lot has done, but a lot can be done.
Right. On that note, I will take one more last question here, and not only specifically for India. I mean, obviously, that would be a good part if you focus that on Indian context. But overall, how sustainable that fintech model is right now? Because compared to Singapore or even China, where we have a lot of matured fintechs, right? They're just almost like 7, 8 years or a decade old fintechs now operating in this space, and they're really matured. Few of them are sustainable also. So considering that experience, do you see the fintechs are actually adopting a sustainable business model, or they're just getting into the way of the startup because everybody is ready to pump in money. Everybody is becoming a unicorn or something like that, and everybody believes that okay, fintech is a nice phenomena to be in.
So the way I look at it is this: there are three main categories.
Right.
I would say three categories. One category is the fintechs whose ambition is to become an incumbent,
Right.
which is why you see the largest ones applying for the licenses to become banks or NBFCs, or payment platforms and stuff in every market. In every market. So one is the category who are tech first, but they want to become a traditionally regulated financial institution.
True.
That's the first category. Second category is the one who want to be the next generation infrastructure providers. So whether you are building payments, whether you're being reconciliation, digitization, merchant acquisition, infrastructure, those have a sustainable path. Some will survive, some will not, but they're building an infrastructure layer on which the next generation of solutions will be built from that perspective. And the third ones which will be sustainable would be the tech companies, pure B2B tech companies who are tech providers. And I don't count them as a real fintech. They're tech companies servicing financial services. That's how I look at them. They're tech companies servicing financial industry. Tomorrow they could serve other sectors, or they could remain specialist for one country, one domain. And which is why I actually find it very funny when a lot of chatbots describe them as fintech. I'm like, as if you're not going to sell it to an FMCG company if you have a real customer there. So which is why that is, I would say, broadly the three areas. Because you see, if you stay a pure fintech, then there are limitations on how much you can grow. You will hit those walls, because either your total aggregate deposit limits will be hit, or your total borrowing limits will be hit. And if you are not a deposit taking instrument, you are not a risk underwriting instrument, you can't be you cannot be an insurtech beyond a point. You cannot be an insurtech beyond a point if the risk is all off your books. True. Because then someday regulators will come and tell you that you cannot run a shadow system and you have to be regulated as a financial holding company, and for all the banking laws apply to you. So which is why beyond a scale, you have to follow the law.
No, true. So before, in fact, I wrap up, one more question on the tech side, is this the big techs? Okay, big techs are also coming up with a lot of innovations, and you can see that Amazon itself is offering now BNPL, right? Buy now, pay later thing on their website. So obviously they have partnered with a lot of fintechs and all. Do you see a tough competition going ahead between fintechs and big techs?
See, the way I look at it is this, right? Big techs have core businesses which they want to facilitate. So whether they want to facilitate an e-commerce business or an advertising business, they have a core business which they want to support. And fintech is an enabler for that. So they are not competing, they are not for, they are not against.
Okay.
So they have an objective which they want to achieve. That's what they will achieve. If that means they need to partner with some of the banks, so be it. You see in America, they have partnered, all the big techs have partnered with some or the other of the top 10 global banks to launch their solutions. So for that, this is my objective and I will do it. And if that means I need to partner with XYZ, I don't care. I'll partner with XYZ. Simple. Fintechs have their own path. They have to figure out whether they want to be in a pure regulated category or not regulated category. If non-regulated category, they have ABC business models. If a regulated category, they have separate business models. For a big tech, it's simple. This is my path. If you are my friend, I partner with you. I don't care whether you're a bank or a non-bank, as long as you help me achieve my objective.
Right. I think very well said, Varun. And it was wonderful listening to you. Thank you so much for sharing your views on etbfsi.com and being part of FinTech Diary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amol.